Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.
Welcome to the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. I'm Tom Ricks, and this is the next in a series that I'm calling The Sins of Silicon Valley. And today we're going to talk about Facebook. So first of all, full disclosure, Facebook is why I'm doing this series. It was the first of the tech companies that I really ran into a problem with just everything about Silicon Valley and just the pernicious, disgusting, filthy attitude that everyone in the Silicon Valley culture has, and that the more I looked at these tech companies, the more I realized that it wasn't just Facebook or Twitter, it's all of them. Like, to one degree or another, every single company in Silicon Valley that I can think of has some degree or another of the problems that I've talked about in every single episode of this podcast. And the thing that sets Facebook apart is they're the worst. They destroy friendships, they destroy families, they destroy democracy, they are an acid drip in our culture. For those of you not familiar with mythology, Loki at one point was involved in the death of Balder, one of the Norse gods, and his punishment was suspended in a cave upside down with the Midgard serpent slowly dripping a little bit of acid from its fangs constantly. It was a constant, never-ending drip. It's a variant of the popular water torture that you've heard of before with a slightly more racist name. And the fact of the matter is that this is Facebook. So everybody in the world has heard of what Facebook is and knows what Facebook, whether or not you're on it. Most people, not all, are aware that Facebook isn't just Facebook. It's also Instagram and WhatsApp, and has branched out into virtual reality and just all kinds of other companies. But, at the end of the day, Facebook starts, begins, ends, and is all the way in the middle about a guy named Mark Zuckerberg. And for those of you not familiar, Mark Zuckerberg has a movie that was made about him and his initial efforts called The Social Network. And if you've never seen The Social Network, I highly advocate that you see it. And it's basically that Mark Zuckerberg is pretty much evil Data, right? If you've ever seen Star Trek The Next Generation, Data is this android that wants to be a human being and is incapable of feeling emotion and does everything he can to mimic human beings. He does have an evil twin in the show called Lore, who is actually capable of feeling emotion, and Data is pretty much a good guy. But I don't think Mark Zuckerberg is Lore, because Lore could feel emotion and could do a sinister laugh. And I don't think he's Data, because Data was altruistic and had the better, the better impact of human beings. Mark is evil Data. He is someone that wants to mimic humanity, but does so for his own selfish reasons and in the worst conceivable way possible, right? My takeaway from The Social Network is that Mark Zuckerberg is not neurotypical. I don't think he has Asperger's syndrome, and I don't think he's autistic. He's something else. And I think that he is incapable of empathy as we understand it. I mean, he sure has a degree of empathy, but I think that he wants to fit in, and that his solution to fitting in was to build an application that would allow him to mimic the presence of friends. And, again, his idea of being altruistic is, if I'm going to make mechanical fake friends for myself, or the illusion of friendship, I'm going to do it for everybody else, and I'm going to make money on it. And that's pretty much what Facebook is, right? I'm going to be a little bit harsh in my next statement, but I stand by what I'm about to say. So if you've ever seen the movie The Matrix, there's a moment where Neo, the protagonist of The Matrix, is asked, now that I've told you the truth, that your illusion, your reality is an illusion, do you want to take this pill that's going to send you back to your little dream world, or this pill, where you're going to live in a harsh reality where AI is trying to hunt you and kill you down and use you as a food source. Neo, being a hero, chose to accept the truth. And there are a million illusions, both for dating sexual predators and political illusions that involve the red pill versus the blue pill. And I sidestep that without saying which is which, because colors at this point are very loaded, with red representing Republicans and blue representing Democrats. But the fact of the matter is that I'm going to tell you a harsh truth, friend, and that is, if you're still on Facebook, in my opinion, if you were in the Matrix, you would choose the pill that goes back to your comfortable reality. And does that sound harsh? It does. But I want to reiterate the fact that right? Unless you're, both the left and the right hate Facebook, right? Everybody knows that Facebook is trash. But the fact of the matter is that that this guy makes money off of hurting people and exploiting children and exploiting the elderly. And yet, if you still are on WhatsApp, or you still have Instagram, or you still have Facebook, right? You know that you're making money for evil. You know that you are, by your mere participation in this product, helping to destroy our society. Now, full disclosure, I only left Facebook myself 4 months ago. But when I did, I bit the bullet entirely. I don't have Instagram. I don't have WhatsApp. I don't use any Facebook product whatsoever. And the deciding factor for me was very personal, right? I've had bump ups with Facebook censors for a long time. The first most notorious incident, the first time I deleted my Facebook account 4 or 5 years ago, was when the clever people at Facebook, whoever their Twitter censors were, whoever their Facebook censors were, applied their 24-hour lockdown, right? And I'm suddenly on 24-hour lockdown, and then literally 5 minutes after I log in, they're hitting me for something else with a 24-hour lockdown. So in other words, this was not a bug. There was no accident in how that happened. I was specifically stalked and targeted by a Facebook employee, and it was patently obvious. So I decided, you know what? Rather than suffer this, I'm just going to delete my entire Facebook account, wait a full 30 days for my permanent data to be deleted, and then recreate my Facebook account from scratch. And I did that about 3 or 4 times because the conservative censors in Twitter, and I know that we're all supposed to believe that the inhabitants of Silicon Valley are all liberal and all progressive, but the fact of the matter is that they're not, and that they're just basically the gamut of regular humanity. And if you've ever interacted with developers, most of them lean to either the conservative side of things or the libertarian side of things. And when it comes to libertarians, about 50% of them are right-wing libertarians who basically believe in the same things put out by the Cato Institute or Fox News, or the same set of lies produced by the Koch brothers. And the fact of the matter is there's no in-between, right? You either believe in the fake manufactured reality of the Koch brothers, or you don't. There's no in-between, right? There's no, everything that they create is a lie. And if you believe in part of that lie, you're in for a penny, in for a pound. It's why I laugh at the concept of people who say that both sides are the same. Both sides literally cannot be the same, because we're talking about two diametrically opposed realities, one of which cannot be true. And anybody that has a brain can look that all the intelligent college-age people are not in the right-wing Fox-constructed reality. I also want to add that Mark Zuckerberg loves the right wing. Now, he is not a registered Republican most of the time. He seems to go kind of back and forth, but he constantly courts, meets with, and sympathizes with people on the right wing. In particular, the reason for this is because he has a buddy called Peter Thiel, who I'm going to do an entirely separate podcast episode on, where the most notorious data leak that Facebook has done merits its own podcast. Frankly, I could do an entire series on nothing but Facebook alone, but I'm only going to do 3 episodes. But suffice to say that Peter Thiel is his own kind of evil. Like, he is just a degree of evil unto itself. But of all the 5 major companies, and frankly, just about any company that I'm going to talk about in this podcast series, Facebook is far and away the worst. They have actually gamified and created deliberately psychological addiction into their app. This is a known fact. You don't have to take my word for it. Just Google it. Google psychological addiction, Facebook. They have literally had human user interface specialists test and focus test and refine and iteration after iteration after iteration ways to addict the human mind to spend as much possible time on Facebook as possible. Have you ever tried to go cold turkey on Facebook? If you have, you suffer withdrawal symptoms, don't you? Right? If you're a regular Facebook user, and I know because I've felt it personally, and I've actually known about it and still used it until they crossed the line. And I'll get to what the Rubicon was finally for me, that I finally just had enough of Mark Zuckerberg and his evil empire. But the fact of the matter is, if you haven't, you should see how addictive this pernicious little thing is. There was a meeting of the House Judiciary Committee yesterday, which is what finally caused me to break down and just decide I need to do this rather than think of the perfect way to approach how I'm going to discuss this incredibly evil company. And that was, everybody in the House Judiciary Committee agrees that the use of algorithms and machine learning by Twitter and Google and Facebook, and frankly almost every Silicon Valley company, is just evil. Have you ever tried to get a hold of a human being in customer service at Facebook? Good luck, because you're not going to get it. The only major company that is actually intelligent when it comes to human interaction and customer service is, to their credit, Amazon. Now, Amazon has all kinds of other problems, and I could have, again, done an entire podcast series on Amazon alone. But Amazon at least understands how actual human beings work, has actual customer service. I can pick up an actual phone and talk to an actual person to solve the problem. Good luck with that at Google or Facebook or Twitter. You can't. I know, because I've tried. So now I'm going to talk about what I call the Rubicon, right? What caused me to finally give up once and for all, forever with Facebook? Well, I have a podcast. Obviously, you're listening to it. And for a while, I used Facebook marketing very successfully to amplify this podcast. And I might not have liked Facebook, but I accepted it as a necessary evil as the most successful way to advertise my podcast. So from time to time, I would also boost a post, right? That's the easiest way for a small company such as my own to get a targeted audience. And back in December, I boosted a post on what was happening with Governor DeSantis and his satanic raid on Rebecca Jones, the data scientist who defied him and was fired by the state of Florida for daring to post COVID data that countered the insidious Republican narrative, right? And so I boosted this post, and literally within seconds, not like a day, seconds, Facebook shut down my ability to boost posts with my small business page. There was no appeal. There was no ability to get a hold of a human being. And I even submitted a complaint to the Better Business Bureau. Do you want to know what happened when I submitted my complaint to the Better Business Bureau? Facebook sent me a cookie cutter, cut and paste response saying, here's the access to our knowledge base. See if what happened to you is somewhere on Twitter. I'd like you to know, ladies and gentlemen, that Facebook isn't actually a member of the Better Business Bureau. And the Better Business Bureau, they actually have an F rating with the Better Business Bureau. But the thing is that the Better Business Bureau is kind of like the participation trophy of business. Like, being a member of the Better Business Bureau or responding to complaints from the Better Business Bureau is, like I said, it's the equivalent of showing up and being alive in a sporting event in elementary school. We all remember those events. We all remember the special events where you get a participation trophy just for showing up. Hooray! You're special! You get a participation trophy! Hey, you came in there, right? There. You came in there. There's not first, second, or third. You just showed up, and you're not dead. You're not a mannequin. Hooray! You're not a cardboard cutout. You win! Right? Let me tell you about how the Better Business Bureau works for anybody who hasn't ever actually dealt with them. When you file a complaint with the Better Business Bureau, they send you an automated response, and it says, "Hello, thank you for filing a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. We'd like you to know that we've gotten in touch with the company and we're waiting for a response." 24 to 72 hours later, "Hello, we'd like you to know that the company has responded. Please enter your email address here to see what they said. Was that good or bad? Thank you for replying to the good or bad question. Have a nice day." I mean, really, that's pretty much it. That's the extent of the supposedly mighty Better Business Bureau, right? To be fair, what else are they supposed to do, right? If they're too harsh on business, none of the businesses are going to show up. If they don't respond at all, people are never going to use them in the first place. The Better Business Bureau used to be feared, and that was back in the day when companies and corporations were held in check, largely before Reagan. But Facebook has an F with them. And why do they have an F? I'll tell you why they have an F. Because Facebook uses AI to respond to everything. You can't get a hold of a human being. You can't pick up the phone. If you write a letter, they're not going to respond. Maybe if you're a millionaire or a billionaire, they might respond. But you can't get Facebook to respond. So we're talking about a company that has been investigated by the United States and the European Union and, frankly, most countries for multiple questionable business practices, suspending pages and accounts of people resisting oppressive regimes, artists, independent thinkers, and they overreact all the time. They try and build a machine version of everything, right? In fact, their response to the clear and ridiculous role that they played in encouraging and allowing insurrectionists to coordinate in the mob attack against our Capitol in January was, and I kid you not, well, we weren't anticipating actual revolt. We were just looking for fake accounts. So the next time that happens, we'll be prepared for it, okay? Thanks, guys. Like, seriously, their response to an attempt at a coup d'etat in our country, the country in which they are incorporated and participate, is to say, we didn't think this would actually happen. Don't worry. The next time it does, we'll get it. They are insane. And they are a danger to the entire country. And as near as I can tell, every attempt to rein them in or enforce them or enforce the law against them is a joke, right? Let's talk about right now the major things based on my research to rein them in, right? We've got the European Union, which at best is going to do a fine and doesn't seem to be doing anything else. And remember that recently the EU expelled Catalonian parliament members at fascist Spain's request from the European Parliament because Spain, right? And they also botched the vaccine deployment. And the only enforcement mechanism they have against illiberal democracies in Poland and Hungary is to take away some of their budget. Oh, by the way, I haven't even been able to do that, right? Europe has a better standard for human rights, and they have some attempts to enforce it. But on a macro scale, for a large company like Facebook, it's a joke. In the United States, there is some talk from investigation from the Department of Justice or Attorney General, but they're focusing more on Google and Apple than they are on Facebook. And the only other serious attempt is basically the right wing, which wants to take away their 230 protection. And for those not familiar, Section 230 is basically the bit in the internet which says that if you go on a website and make a comment, that website isn't liable for you making a comment. If they take away Section 30, the internet goes away, right? That's trying to remove Section 230 protection from the internet is basically trying to destroy the internet. And by the way, let's be honest, conservatives really only want to take it away for their side. They would be perfectly, like, you look at Parler and Gab and MyPillowGuy's social media, they're all about protecting Nazi and hate speech, but I dare you to be a liberal and try and talk about liberal items on the right-wing social media. And by the way, for those of you who are not familiar, I have personal experience that Facebook and Twitter attack liberal commentators. Like, I'm shadow banned on Twitter, and I'll cover Twitter in a bit, which, by the way, it's really freaky, the link between the final breaking point I had with Facebook and one of the 2 episodes I'm going to be doing on Twitter with a guy named Max Nordau is just unfucking believable what's going on with Twitter. But again, I'll cover that in a separate episode. So the thing that's even worse about Facebook than any of the other companies is that Mark Zuckerberg, due to the structure of ownership of Facebook, is impossible to remove. So many companies have multiple forms of stock. There's the ownership of the stock, and then there's the controlling stock. Facebook is no exception. The difference between Facebook and any of the other major tech companies, Microsoft, Google, Apple, or Amazon, is that Mark Zuckerberg owns more than 50% of the controlling stock, which means that there is literally no circumstance where a board or all of the other shareholders united, if every other person that owns a stock in Facebook all demanded that Mark Zuckerberg step down, Mark wouldn't have to if he didn't want to. Mark Zuckerberg has complete and total control of Facebook. And from my perspective, that means that Mark Zuckerberg has complete and total singular responsibility for every friendship lost, every business ruined, every violent act that is ever deliberately linkable to Facebook, or even partially linkable to Facebook, which would include the revolution attempted on the 6th of January in 2021, can be directly attributable to Mark Zuckerberg. Let me repeat that. Mark Zuckerberg is the only person who controls Facebook. Full stop. Nobody else can take it away from him. Nobody else can wrest control of Facebook from Mark Zuckerberg. And that means that that man has responsibility for every act of evil. And there are many. Google yourself. And I've been researching this company for quite some time. How many acts of evil and bullying and cyberbullying and terrorism and insurrection and lies and threats come from Facebook. And this man is so obsessed with solving every problem using AI that even when he tries to fix the problem, even when he's willing to acknowledge the problem, he is so inept that it almost never does fix the problem. There are still Russian trolls on Facebook. There are still cyberstalkers on Facebook. There are still pedophiles and child pornography on Facebook. Facebook is a fetid swamp of evil. And if you use it, you are encouraging Mark Zuckerberg to continue this behavior. The federal government can't fix it. They're not going to break up Facebook. Certainly not Joe Biden. And no state has the clout to do it. And the European Union can't do it. So if you're using Facebook, you are perpetuating this evil. If you hear my voice and you are still using Facebook, you are part of the problem. Now, I don't blame you. Just like I don't blame a smoker for big tobacco. But you need to own up to the fact that you are literally contributing to evil. If you use WhatsApp, or you use Instagram, or you use any product of any kind owned by the Facebook company, own it and move on with your life. It's very, very difficult to completely avoid any secondary consequences, right? Watch The Good Place. The Good Place is a great show, and one of the things it shows is that sometimes you can do evil just by buying a can of soup, right? There might be an ingredient in that soup that threatens an endangered species, or you're contributing to carbon. It's very difficult to be a human being in the 21st century and not contribute to evil. And at the end of the day, I'm okay with that. But you need to be aware of it, and you need to own it. You need to accept the fact that by continuing to use Facebook more than any other tech company, right? You can use Apple and do your best to counter the fact that it's being made by forced slave labor in China. Or you can use Google and accept the fact that Google has a management company that encourages racism and sexual harassment. Nothing is perfect. Good luck finding a grocery store or, God forbid, a pizza company that isn't run by some kind of psychopath that is worthy of boycott. So I get it. But Facebook is uniquely evil. And you know it. So accept the fact that you're not as noble a human being as you think you are, and move about your day. But I do encourage you to go a week without using it. If you've never done that, you need to understand how perniciously addictive this thing is. You need to understand that if you have children or elderly parents whose mind is a little soft and impressionable, how effective Facebook propaganda is seeping into their mind constantly, every day, just like the acid drip on Loki in Norwegian mythology. This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, at Amazon and other markets. RedAnvilCreative.com contains all our podcasts. Copyright 2021.
To fight the forces of evil!